Hello and welcome, and today we're going to do a video on managerial accounting margin of safety. It's a pretty easy concept, but we have some problems that are kind of built on margin of safety that I think are pretty helpful. So margin of safety could be the percentage or the dollar amount or the units that our sales could decrease before we reach the break-even point. Remember, the break-even point is the point of zero profit, where the revenues equal expenses. Anything below that, you're losing money. Anything above that, you're making a profit. Now, you can only have margin of safety if you're above the break-even point. So, for example, let's say our current level of sales is 3,000 units, and times 30, I assume $30 selling price, our sales are 90,000. Let's say our break-even point is 2,400 and times 30 will be 72,000. So what's our margin of safety? Our margin of safety is going to be, the 3,000 minus the 2,400. That means our sales could drop by 600, or our sales could drop by 90,000 minus the 72,000. It could drop by 18,000. So you could say our margin of safety is 600 units or $18,000 in sales. Or you could do percentages, which would be the 600 units divided by the original 3,000 units. Our sales could drop 20%, or our sales could drop 18,000 divided by the original 90,000, and that's also 20%. So the three answers are 600 units, $18,000, or 20%. Either one. A 20% decrease in sales means we hit the break-even point, and then below that, we actually would start losing money. All right, so let's do the variable cost and income statement. Let's do a couple little problems. We'll call this problem 1 right here. So here's the information. Current sales are 1,500 units for $30,000. The current profit is 5,600, and the margin of safety is 700 units. Well, here we have several different things you can answer, and it doesn't look like you can work the problem. There's not enough information, but let's see what we can do. First of all, we want to set up our variable costing statement based on the current level of sales, and then also based on the break-even point of sales. And we're going to have 3 columns. One column will be total dollars, so total sales, total dollars. And then there'll be per unit dollars, and then percentages. And all these will work together and make sure we know what's going on this. So current sales. Current sales are 1,500 units. I'm going to type that in. And our current sales are $30,000. All right. Our current profit is 5,600. So this goes in this column, 5,600. And it says the margin of safety is 700 units. That means our sales could drop from 1,500 down 700. So 1,500, we put it over here, 1,500 minus 700 gives us 800 units. So what we have is, we know this is our break-even point is 800 units because our margin of safety is 700. We're 700 above what the break-even point is. Now, we can start figuring out some things. We can say, well, if 30,000 is our dollar amount divided by the number of units, we must be selling this at $20 each. And remember, on a problem like this, we always make the percentage on sales to be 100%. All right? Now, we also know that if our sales price is 20, then we also must know that 800 times the 20, we must have sales of 16,000. And because it's break-even point, we know the profit is 0. We also know this is 100%, but we're kind of stuck unless you start thinking about how the relationship works. Now, what do we know? We know variable cost changes with volume. So the variable cost here will be different than the variable cost here. But we can assume, what's the definition of fixed cost? A fixed cost is a total cost that stays the same. So what we can figure out is we can say, hey, whatever the fixed cost is here, it's the same here, so that doesn't change. So let's give ourselves a little workspace here. And so let's think about this. If we have an increase, let's look at the two data points. We have 2 points, the break even and current. We can say an increase in sales, and we could say minus an increase in variable cost gives us an increase in profit. Now, how are we able to ignore fixed costs? Because we're assuming fixed cost is the same. If you want to think about it this way, we can also do, let me show you this way. We could say, well, here's our sales. So let's just look at the change. The change. Our sales go from 30,000 minus the 16. So our sales go from 16 to 30. Let's just make it positive here, the change. So our sales go up 14,000. And we know our fixed cost goes up 0. And our profit goes from 0 to 5,600. Therefore, it's a change of 5,600. All right, so let's think about what we know on this, and we can make some assumptions. So we're assuming that, in fact, let me put dollar signs all the way down. We're assuming that there's no change in fixed cost. So therefore, the 0 change in fixed cost is going to, and the 5,600 change, that means the change in contribution margin is going to be 5,600. This right here is for the difference in this total and this total. So it has to all be variable cost. So the 14,000 minus the 5,600 means our variable cost must have been 8,400, the difference. So we make this 100%. Then what is 8,400 divided by the 14,000? Well, it looks like it's 60%. Let's do the percentage all the way down. So if we have 5,600 divided by the change of 14,000, then what we have is 40%. There's 0 change going on here, and the 5,600 divided by the 14,000 is that 40%. Now we're assuming that fixed cost does not change. That's the definition of fixed cost. The definition of fixed cost is the total cost that stays the same. So if we know this is 60% and 40% and 0% and 40%, this would be, we know that's correct. Then what do we know about the variable cost? Well, the variable cost is 20 times the 60%. And we can subtract out the 20 minus the 12, which is going to be 40% of the 20, right? 8 divided by 20 is 40% of the 20. We can take the total variable cost and say 800 times 12, right? That's 9,600. Or we could just simply take the 16,000 times the 60%. And that's also 9,600. So having multiple ways of looking at the same thing is very helpful. So our contribution margin is going to be 16 minus 9,600 is 6,400. What do you think our fixed cost is? Contribution margin minus fixed cost gives us 0. Well, this must be exactly 6,400, right? This must be exactly 6,400. So if we do the math, continue on, 6,400 divided by the original 800 units, that's $8. Well, 0 divided by 800 units is going to be 0 per unit. 6,400 divided by the original 16,000, that's 40%. And then 0 divided by 16,000. 0 divided by the 16,000 is 0%. We've got this whole thing completed here. And now we can just start dropping this in here. Now, what stays the same? Well, we know that this is 12 and we know this is 8 because this is 60% and this is 40%. And we know that our fixed cost is $6,400 because that's given. So what stays the same? Let me highlight this. We'll highlight in just a second. So what is the variable cost? 30,000 times 60%. What is 30 minus the 18? That's 12,000. 12,000 minus 6,400 gives us 5,600. Let's finish out the per unit. So the totals divided by the unit gives us the per unit number. The totals divided by the units gives us the per unit, 373. And we can do percentages on this. We can do either per unit, the 4.27 divided by the 20, or we can do the 5,600 divided by the 30,000. And that all works out. So what we have is 40% minus 21.3 equals 18.4%. All right. Now let's do the next one. All right, there's our final answer. So let's go back and figure out some of the fill-in-the-blank answers. What is our selling price per unit? Our selling price per unit is $20. What's our total fixed cost? Our total fixed cost is $6,400. What's our variable cost per unit? Well, it's $12. What's our contribution margin percentage? Well, that's 40%. What is our break-even in units? Our break-even units is going to be the 800 that we just calculated. And what's the break-even in dollars? Well, we have to sell $16,000 worth to break even. And we sell $16,000, we have zero profit. All right, let's do the second one here. If the current sales are $2,500 for $150,000, our current sales are $2,500, $150,000. The current profit is $9,000. Our margin of safety is 20%. Now, what do we do with this 20%? We can reduce our sales in dollars by 20%, or we can reduce our sales in units by 20%. Both of them reduced by 20% will hit the break-even point. So, an easy way to calculate this, we can take the 2,500 times 1 minus the 20%. So that gives us the 80%. So our sales could drop 20%, which would be 500 down to 2,000, looks like. And we can do the same thing with our sales could drop 20% down to 120,000. All right, our break-even point, the profit is 0. So let's see what we can do here. Let's think about the change. Let's copy this and drop it here. What about just the change? The change going from 150, 120 to 150 is a $30,000 change. Our profit goes up 9,000. So a $30,000 change means our profit goes up 9,000. Our fixed cost increases by 0. And so therefore, our contribution margin is 9. So 30 minus the 9. Our variable cost must be 21,000. And if we do the percentages, we can do the 21,000 divided by the 30,000. That's 70%. So here's what we know. We know that this is 100%, this is 70%, this is 30%. This is 100% here. This is 70% here, and this is 30% here. And we don't know the fixed cost, but the fixed cost will be the same under both assumptions. Now, once we know this, what's our sales per unit? Well, 120 divided by 2,000, we're selling each one for $60. So 120,000 times 70%, we must be 84,000, and 120 minus 84 must be 36,000. Well, if our profit is 0, we know that, then this must be 36 minus the 0. This must be 36,000 is our fixed cost. Keep going here. So $60 times 70% means our variable cost is $42 each. If we subtract out the 60 minus the 42, we get 18. If we take the 36,000 divided by the 2,000, that must be 18. And we simply subtract 18 minus 18, and we got 0. At 0, total profit, well, divided by units is still going to be 0 profit per unit. Here we can take the 36,000 divided by the 120,000, that's 30%, and once again 30 minus the 30% gives us 0%. Well, we're halfway finished. Let's do this portion, and then we can fill in the answers on the fill in the blank. Our variable cost is 150,000 times 70. And we simply subtract out 150 minus the 105, and we got 45,000. 45 minus the 9, we're estimating fixed cost to be 36,000. So yes, that's correct in both cases. So yes, it's 36,000. We've already figured out that this is 60 selling price per unit, 42 is the variable cost per unit, 18 is the contribution margin per unit. So let's calculate the 36,000 divided by the number of units, and we'll get 1440 is the fixed cost per unit. And our profit per unit, 18 minus 1440, is going to be $3.60. We have a couple little percentages to go. 36,000 divided by the 150,000, and the 360 divided by the 60. You can do it either column. You can do it this column, 9 divided by 150, or 360 divided by 60. You get the same percentage. Let me prove it. So 6%, 9 divided by the 150 is going to be 6%. So let's fill in the blanks here. What's our selling price per unit? Selling price per unit is $60. What's our total fixed cost? Our total fixed cost is $36,000. Our variable cost per unit is $42. Our contribution margin percentage is 30%. Our break even in units is going to be 2,000. And our break even in dollars is going to be $120,000. All right, that's how you do this type of problem. Margin of safety is very handy, and just having some skills to figure out break even and current level and margin of safety, these are good little problems. You have 1, 2, 3, 4 items, and you can calculate all this income statement, both total dollars, per unit dollars, and percentages. So it's pretty amazing little information that you have and what you can work through and solve lots of problems. Thank you for watching.